And I guess one of the central figures discussed throughout the day was one Chris Jericho. And can't say that this return completely came out of left field. There were at least like hints toward this, but in fact, you tuned in and there's Tony Schiavone in the center of the ring, ready for the contract signing. And as he is teeing the segment up, he's being interrupted by pyro going off, and he's getting interrupted by this and has to reset. And then finally, after the last set of pyro goes off, Judas begins. And out comes Chris Jericho for the first time on AEW programming in nearly a year. And he comes out. The whole crowd is singing. We cut to Ted Irvin, his father, just belting this song out. And Jericho is out. He proceeds to enter the ring. And he spent a lot of time just rallying this crowd, getting them to go. I mean, this was kind of him at his Hulk Hoganist, just going. And it kind of felt like this crowd, like they were ready for the segment to start at this point. And Jericho was just wanting this crowd to respond as loud as possible. What did you think of just the response here of that Jericho got?
Well, I have to say the whole thing was incredibly weird.
Starting with the pyro, or
really from start to finish, because like, what are we supposed to take from, assuming the pyro interruption is all part of the whole presentation? Like, what is this supposed to mean? Like, did Jericho fuck up the pyro intentionally? What is that supposed to be?
I mean, odds are, they had some idea, but it made no sense. Yeah, I mean, it's possible this thing, I don't know what the point of this would have been. Like, why wouldn't it just be all of a sudden Tony Schiavone's talking and then pyro goes off and his music plays?
I felt like it could have been an actual fuck up.
It's possible. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
So that was really strange. Jericho comes out and, okay, yeah, like Winnipeg pops for Judas, like, of course. Then the music dies down, and then like there's a positive reaction, I would deem this, but like I wouldn't say it was deafening. It was not deafening to the extent, like let's compare this. If and granted, we're talking about 4,000-ish people in a venue that holds over 16,000. Okay, so you do have that. But like if we're comparing this to, a big return, a big debut. But 4,000 like size arenas for AEW have just sounded great. Now, like, what is the capacity of this place?
I just said over 16,000. So
okay.
you had that. Like, this probably would have had a totally different dynamic. But like Winnipeg, to my understanding, like it doesn't have a venue of, that would be ideal for them. Like they probably shouldn't be running 16,000 seat arenas, but that's kind of your option if you're going to Winnipeg. So that's
with
what they had here.
TV and everything. Yes, understood. Yeah, so like the music dies down, crowd like responds well.
Yeah.
But then like it felt as if Jericho was almost like trying to like encourage a louder reaction because he wasn't satisfied.
Oh, he was cheerleading the crowd here,
but it came across like he was begging for a bigger reaction, and at that point, it almost signals that this is not a strong enough reaction, by his own standards and maybe to our ears as well. And he just kept like encouraging it, and it didn't really ever come. So the result of this felt like it was not necessarily flat, but flatter than perhaps what was intended. And knowing this is Chris Jericho, I do have to consider like how much of all of this is intentional, especially if like he intends on coming back as a heel. I'm sure he's well aware of maybe like audience sort of like demand for him or lack thereof, within AEW. And so would this have been some intentional way of creating maybe a bit more of a heel dynamic to the return? I don't know, but I'm left with more questions than I would say excitement, for the return coming off of this first.
Yeah, I just think it was a crowd that was, it was not like he didn't get like a very good response coming out. Like you would think so. It's like, it's his hometown. It's been a year since he's been there. It's a big surprise, but it just felt like it was, by prolonging it, you just saw like the fade out extend. And then finally he just says, he's home, and that's it. and he leaves, and that was it. That was the only period we saw of Jericho. He later posted a video that he was recording, just announcing in 10 minutes, I'm making my big return. And he said more in this video in his car than he did out here in front of the ring. But, certainly.
What did he say?
All he said was he was recording himself like 10 minutes before the show was to start and saying, I'm about to make my return. And then he posted it after the segment. And like he just said, it's going to be magic or it's going to be something.
Okay. So, yeah, I would say for those people that are critical of Chris Jericho in AEW, I don't know if this would have been a segment that would have changed your mind. We didn't really get anything to come out of this. We don't know who he'd be feuding with.
It was just Jericho is back. That's the story. Jericho is back. And
but I would also say, even if you were welcoming him back, it didn't necessarily give you a whole lot to be excited over, because it really was just like, okay, he's back. Now let's see next week what he's got. But he does look in incredible shape.
Yeah, he certainly does. He had the abs here. He was, he looks in good shape. I guess your question, number one, is that I wonder how much this guy made over the last year.
Well, yeah. What's his downside?
I would imagine he is, like, it's quite possible he is the highest paid guy in AEW, and you just sat him for a year, and now he is back. I can see there's going to be, naturally, I think there are going to be the people that were tired of Jericho to begin with that are going to feel like this is, so one thing that we have talked about consistently was like this show, in the absence of Christian, the absence of Copeland and Jericho and Jeff Jarrett being more de-emphasized, like the show had a much more youthful feel. But this is a year where you are trying to sell tickets to Wembley Stadium. Next year is the end of their TV deal, and Jericho does hold a lot of weight in terms of like names that you do have. Like, this is not someone. Like, I can understand that there's some fatigue on Chris Jericho, but I can also see a hell of an argument that you don't want to just be handing this guy over. And if you're Chris Jericho as well, like whenever the deal is up with an AEW, like what is your best option at this point? You can say like AEW, like it did seem like everything was in alignment, that a WWE return was going to give him a big lift. But it's a question mark of like how valued he'd be in WWE at this stage as well. There's a lot of open-ended questions and how he's going to be utilized. But I would certainly imagine that if you are someone that thinks he's just going to come back and be in these like small he is going to be emphasized. I think and they are like, there's a reason he is back, and they're going to want to utilize him to a huge degree this year.
So I guess my question would be, is this part of his existing contract, this particular moment, or would he have come to a new commitment with Tony Khan that would have, prompted Tony to want to put him back onto television?
It's a great question because, from our understanding was that there was time to, like, originally when he signed that last deal, Variety had reported that it ran through the end of 2025. And then it was reported that time got tacked on to that deal. To your point, if this guy's coming back and we've only got X amount of, like, let's just throw out a number, like 6 months. Yeah, what good does that do us to put him back here for 6 months if there's that thought that...
I would argue a lot of good, but if we're going by Tony Khan's philosophy of not featuring guys, not wanting to provide airtime for people that are just going to end up with the competition, this wouldn't necessarily align with that.
It very much goes against Tony Khan's MO of putting people on TV that you believe are going, and the fact that he's going to eat up a lot of television time, and what are you going to have for it at the end of it? Now, maybe you could argue that, hey, if it's 6 months and he takes us through Wembley, we're going to play that card, and then he moves on.
He puts over, like Kevin Knight, like whatever, you name it. Yes.
So, we don't know the answer to that question. He could have a new deal. He could be on this existing one. We obviously don't know the answer to that question, but it's a really important question to ask for sure.
Yeah. Another important question I think to ask is, how will this Chris Jericho return differ from previous Chris Jericho returns or previous Chris Jericho incarnations, many of which recently have, I mean, pretty much bombed. You know, we're talking about the Learning Tree, which maybe had some, you know, glimmers of hope, but ultimately I don't think did a whole lot for really the show itself, nor like, you know, like the members of the group. We're talking about the Jericho Appreciation Society. These are maybe, considering how much this person is paid and his great successes prior in this company and beyond, probably not to the level that, like, you know, you'd want out of a Chris Jericho. So the cornerstone is something that he's trademarked, right? You know, that kind of made some headlines. What would this be, and can he afford another failure?
I think certainly that scrutiny is going to be there of like how, because like I don't think he's coming back to be a mid-card player. Like he just like if you're either in or you're out on the Chris Jericho business, and if you're in, which tonight certainly shows that they are, like you have to maximize that value. So whatever he is attached to, it's going to be under great scrutiny, I think, for all those reasons that you list of, and I think some of it is, I think some of the criticism is warranted. I think in other times, I think that he, you know, I think his head was always in the place of working with younger talent. He certainly lost like quite a lot to talent. I mean, it was sometimes the follow-up just was not there, and that doesn't fall on him. I mean, it's, you know, he had that loss to Bandito, and, you know, Bandito has had his own, you know, he's had injuries, he's had time missed and stuff like that. But, you know,
remember when he lost to Action Andretti?
Well, that's an example. Like a Chris Jericho would be well within his rights to not want to go for something like that. And from all indications, like that was his idea, and they just, like, that's not on him for the follow-up. I don't look at Action Andretti as a mark against him. Now, if you want to look at the Jericho Appreciation Society, like the Learning Tree, like that stuff was, you know, more misses than hits that he had in that run. And I think you can associate some of that with him. But this is not a guy that at the end of the program was unwilling to put people over. But I think like there is, you know, he's a greatly maligned figure among certain members of your audience, but I think there's a lot of pressure right now when you want to move tickets for Wembley. That show almost needs to be a success for you, whatever that is. And at 21,000 tickets right now, they have a lot to move. And you know, how many people do we have that could make a difference? And I think they look at Jericho as being one of those people that we have access to.
In speaking about like the possibility of Chris Jericho going to a WWE, I was looking at that with a lot of excitement. And I guess I asked myself why. Like, what would be so different about him being in the WWE? Something about it, though, just like made me excited in the way that like Cody going to WWE or Punk going to WWE was completely different for them.
Well, it's the natural new coat of paint that you get when you are gone for a long time from a company and come back.
So if you're AEW and if you're Tony Khan, how can you capture that feeling, but while keeping Chris Jericho within your own company so that you stand to benefit from that fresh coat of paint?
Well, I would certainly want to ditch a lot of the elements that were present the last like year to 18 months. Whether good or bad, just change is good. And Jericho's been very, like, that has been a lot of his mindset, is always changing things up. The problem was, like, he was going through a number of years, I would say, you know, from the list onward through those first couple of years in AEW, where he was having a lot of hits and he was getting stuff over, and he was, you know, it just felt like he believed he had the magic touch. And then I think like there was a certain pushback towards that, and some of his ideas were falling flat. So I think you've had the year off. I can't imagine this is a guy that was just sitting back and not thinking about wrestling for a lot of time. And we're going to see like what that collaborative process is, and ultimately what Tony Khan's reasoning for having him here are. I would say, like, if you just don't want a guy to go to WWE, I don't think that's enough that you just use a guy. Like, I think if that was the case, like, I don't think you're bringing him back in a prominent spot. Like, this would signal to me is that he's got an idea, probably a big idea, and they were able to come together and work this out.
Let's see.
It is WrestleMania month at postwrestling.com. Wei Ting and John Pollock go live all WrestleMania week beginning Monday, April the 13th. Sign up for the Post Wrestling Cafe and you will get live shows all week long leading into our coverage that weekend of WrestleMania 42. This month, we're also bringing you reviews of Spring Break 2 from New Orleans in 2018 and a special Patrons Pick edition of Rewind Away. Sign up now at postwrestlingcafe.com, and this month, new subscribers get 50% off for the first month. Head on over to postwrestlingcafe.com.